Well, greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up. It is my favorite time of year. I love the month of October. Several different reasons for that. I live up here in the upstate of South Carolina, where I can see the beautiful mountains in the distance from my home if I look really closely. Leaves are changing. It's a cool weather out there today, and it is really, really beautiful. A lot of exciting things happening here at the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, one of which that we always mention is the Nitro Bass Boat giveaway. Now, for the last 4 years, I have given away a fully rigged Nitro Bass Boat. The reason that we do this is to raise money for the Bass Chaplain and Well Spoken Ministries, which enables me to be on the Bassmaster Elite Series Tour and to go and do ministry wherever it is people call me to do ministry. And I speak at wild game banquets and revivals and churches all over the country. And it gives me the freedom to be able to go, whether they can pay me or not. I just love to share the gospel of Christ with people, love to focus on men. It's not because I don't love you ladies. Statistics tell us this, that if you reach a child for Christ, there's a 4% chance that child's entire family will start coming to church. If you reach a woman for Christ, 17% chance that woman's entire family will start coming to church. But if you reach a man for Christ, there's a 94% chance that man's entire family will start coming to your church. Women have carried our churches for the last 50 years, and it's time for men to step up to the plate. And my ministry is focused on reaching men sportsmen with the gospel of Jesus Christ, the life-changing message of Jesus Christ. But if you'd like to support us through the boat giveaway, you can go to www.chriswells.org, click the button that says Win the Nitro Bass Boat, and you can get a ticket, and hopefully you will win a bass boat, but you will guarantee that you're going to support a ministry that's going to share the gospel to sportsmen all over this country. A lot of exciting things happening this week. Now, we've got a bunch of guests coming up. The other day, we're supposed to have Jimmy Houston on. Jimmy could not make his video work, so we'll give Jimmy a second chance and a third or fourth chance if he wants one. Al Linder is going to be on our podcast. Clay Dyer. We've got lots and lots of cool guys coming up. Very, very excited about our guest today. Now, I love this podcast. I got a really good email from a gentleman this week that said he's a new believer, just started listening to the podcast, and really, really is gone and kind of binge watched all of them. Really awesome to hear things like that. If you haven't liked or subscribed to our podcast on YouTube, like for you to give it a like for you to give us a thumbs up, and also hit the little red subscribe button. It really helps this podcast and helps our ministry when you do that. In the algorithm of YouTube, it helps it go out to many, many more places. If you're listening to this just on podcast, wherever it is you get your podcast, whether it's iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to, if you will give us a 5-star rating and make a comment, it would help us tremendously. And we really appreciate you doing that. Tonight's guest, there are very few times when I ever envisioned that I would ever get to interview one of my mentors. Now, today's guest is not a professional fisherman, but he is a professional fisher of men. Now, I'm not going to exaggerate when I tell you this. This man is the most creative minister I have ever met in my life. Now, when you hear the term evangelist or hear the term fishers of men, a lot of times it envisions a guy in a suit and, he's up there and he's real kind of stiff and up there just kind of doing his thing and kind of, I don't know. This guy's not like that at all. He is the most creative minister I've ever seen in my life. One of the first times I ever saw my guest today, he was doing a chalk drawing, and I was at a church, and it was a bunch of kids there. There was a kid sitting there beside me, and my guest today is named Bill Cox, and Bill was drawing the crucifixion scene, and he was narrating it with his voice, and the kid was kind of sitting there, and all of a sudden Bill steps back, and the entire scene comes to life. A lightning bolt comes through the thing. And I remember that kid's face. She just went, oh man. It was one of the most powerful presentations of the gospel I had ever seen in my life. And I started watching this guy, watched him at the Big U thing in our Carolina Coliseum for the State Baptist Youth Camp, things like that. did things with ministry that I didn't know could be done. And tonight, we're going to talk about a lot of things that Bill Cox has done, but let me tell you the most important thing that Bill did in my life. All right. Bill is the man who taught me how to lead someone to Christ. And let me tell you something, outside of being saved, that is the greatest thing that I have ever been taught in my life. And I use it every single opportunity I get to share Christ with people throughout this planet. And it's all thanks to Bill Cox showing me how to do that. The guy that taught me how to fish for men. He also does a one-man fishing show called Peter Once a Fisherman. It's a look at the life of Jesus through the eyes of Peter, and it is awesome. You were going to hear about that, so stay tuned. Coming up next, Bill Cox from Concoction Ministries on the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up. I have as my guest today, I can't say this enough, this guy is my mentor, taught me how to fish for men, showed me exactly what to do, how to lead someone to Christ. The impact that he has made in my life, I cannot overstate. Bill Cox, welcome to the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast.
It is an honor to be on. Is it still America's slowest growing podcast?
It is. And for right now, it looks like it will be for a while. It'll be America's slowest growing podcast, although we are growing, but it is growing slowly.
Well, I know we've been talking about doing this for some time. And, I thought the longer I could put it off, then, that would give it a little bit more time to grow. But it's good to be with you, Chris.
I'm hoping that we pull in all of the old SALT staff and all those people that come in, the non-fishing crowd today. But I tell you, I had a pro that
I will not help you with the fishing crowd. I realize that.
Well, the fishing crowd can be fickle, but I did have a pro fisherman on today, and he had to back out. And so I said, you know what? I want to have Bill on. And I introduced you in my intro as not a pro fisherman, but I would say you are a pro fisher of men. And in my life, you taught me how to share my faith. Now let me just ask you this question. Let's just start. You are always dubbed as the most creative minister that anyone has ever seen. Now, when you think about evangelists, you think about some guy that's up there in a suit and he's preaching out of the Bible and he's yelling at people in a tent or something like that. But that's not you. And I just, there's no other word to say, but the most creative ministry person I've ever met in my life. Tell us about the journey of Concoctions Ministry. How did you start and where, and tell us, just how you got to where you are right now.
Oh, wow. Well, that's kind of you to say that. Whoever has been saying those things, please just keep talking to those same people. That would be good. I've been in ministry a long time. And if this helps my credibility just a little bit, I was actually walking around a lake in front of my house, just praying about what I should be doing with my life. I had been wrestling with the idea of going into ministry for some time. And when I say wrestling, it's not even anything that I had resisted. I felt like it would be an honor if I would have the opportunity to serve the Lord. And I'd always kind of heard people talk about being called into the ministry, and I'm not sure I knew exactly what that meant. But as I was walking around the lake in front of our house, there was no lightning, there was no booming voice from the sky, but just a strong peace that, yeah, this is obviously what I need to be doing with my life. I need to minister. And somewhere along the way, I guess, as I began to consider how to minister, I felt a strong leading to work with students, with youth. And the more I got into it, the more I began to realize that I didn't want to just do things in the same way that it had always been done. Somewhere along the way, I heard that the 7 last words of the church is, but we've never done it that way before. I'm not sure if I counted those words correctly or not. And we just started doing some things differently. Uh, Early on, we started doing, remember these slide presentations, multimedia presentations. It grew into doing 9 projector multimedia presentations. Somewhere along the way, I started doing chalk drawings. That happened not even by plan. I was on a mission trip, and we were expecting George Schrieffer, who was our minister of education, to come and do a chalk drawing at about 12 different vacation Bible school churches that we were working at. And George got word that his aunt had died in Chicago and he wasn't going to be able to come. And I just didn't like the idea that we had been building this up to kids all week long, and they were going to at least be disappointed and maybe even think that we'd been leading them on. And so I just pretty much stayed up all night and put together just a chalk drawing setup, recorded our own soundtrack, and over the next couple of days did chalk drawings at 10 different churches. And so that was basically how it got started. And I just began to realize,
you right there.
Yeah,
I want to set the tone. I talked about this a little bit in my intro. The first time I ever saw your chalk drawing, I was in a church and had brought a group of kids there as a youth pastor. And I was sitting next to this kid, and I remember he was just kind of kicked back like this, and he was kind of looking. And I had told him, I said, "Man, you better watch this. You better watch this." And his name was Clint Huggins. He's a good friend of mine. I'm good friends with his dad. And Clint's sitting there, and he's kind of doing around like that. And you're narrating the chalk drawing, and then you step back, and the chalk drawing comes to life. And I looked at his face, and he jumped up, and he went, "Oh man, I can't." He was just going. I had to back him down out of his seat. He was so floored by that chalk drawing and how it, the creativity of that. And I'll never forget that reaction. But that was pretty cool. I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but that was a pretty
no,
cool.
that's quite all right. I love to hear that. And I don't know if I ever would have thought that from doing those 10 chalk drawings in 2 days time, that it seems like 100 years later, we're still doing chalk drawings. They've come a long way as far as the special effects and the lighting and the things that we do with them. But that kind of dabbled with some of that. Is I started out as a minister to youth at Taylor's First Baptist Church just outside of Greenville, South Carolina, and loved that local church ministry, and very much loved doing that. But at the same time was getting a lot of invitations to do some of the other kinds of things that we were doing, and felt like I needed to go one way or the other. I needed to just devote all my attention to the youth at the church I was at, or devote my attention to the what for lack of a better description, of traveling ministry and itinerant ministry. And somewhere along the way, Kathy and I got engaged, and I kind of put aside the idea of traveling. It just seemed like a crazy idea, and I thought, okay, we're going to get married, let Kathy take good care of me. I'm in a great situation, and so I was pretty comfortable with that. And one night as I was going to bed, and again, God has never spoken to me in an out loud voice, no thunder, no lightning. But as I was praying, going to bed, I felt like in a very strong way, the Lord was saying, "It's time to go." And I argued with that. I thought, Lord, this is a horrible time to start a traveling ministry. Have you seen gas prices lately? Not nearly as bad then as they may be now, but even as I said that, I thought, yeah, I think he knows what gas prices are. I don't think there's a problem with that. And I said, but God, Bill Williams is a very practical man. What's he going to think when I say, Bill, not only am I marrying your daughter this summer, I'm quitting my job as well. And he kind of assured me that that he could take care of Bill. And Kathy's dad ended up being one of the just most supportive people all through our ministry. And I just could not find any peace that night. I wrestled with that a good bit of the night, and until I said, Lord, I don't understand this. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but I believe you're leading me to do this. And so we made the decision at that point to eventually leave Taylor's. It didn't happen right away, but left Taylor's and went on the road doing, again, chalk drawings, multimedia, speaking, doing drama. Back then, we used to do a lot of puppet presentations. We did discipleship training has always been a big part of what we have done.
Right.
And so there was a time there, especially our first son Christopher was born in people used to ask me, how many days a year are you on the road? And I didn't really know. So I finally went back through my calendar and counted it up. And we were for several years there. We were on the road about 285 days a year, and so we were staying on the road quite a bit of time. And that's how it all got started. There's obviously a whole lot more, but I'll let you keep asking the questions.
You know, you have done presentations at Walt Disney World. You've done conferences all over the country. You've worked with some of the biggest names in the industry, you know, in the Christian industry,
including Chris Wells.
And well, I mean, I'm thinking, I mean, Amy Grant, Mylon Lefevre, I mean, all of the greats that, you know, that everybody grew up, you know, hearing and stuff. You've hobnobbed with all of these people. You've got a chance to minister, you know, right there beside all of those people. Do you have a specific memory of anybody that you know, like that you want to share? I know that one of the stories you used to tell us at camp was you used to talk about Amy Grant and her focus, you know, that she was counseling, you know, with a kid one night, and that, you know, her focus was just, you know, everything. You said, I believe a bomb could have gone off and she would have been focused on that kid, counseling and stuff like that. Yeah. What are some memories you have, you know, about, you know, some of the greats in ministry that you've been around?
Well, Amy was actually in our college ministry when I was at Taylor's First Baptist. We had a big college ministry. I was actually minister over middle school, senior high, and college. We didn't know any better back then, and so we had a college luncheon, and we would have you know, up to 350 college students, mainly from Furman University and North Greenville, that came. And first 2 years of college, Amy went to North Greenville. Excuse me. Wow, she went to Furman. She went.
I can't believe you made. Yeah, I can't believe you made that mistake. So.
I can't either. Yeah, she went to Furman her first 2 years, and came to Taylor's and was a part of our college ministry. And so it was nice to be able to have her lead music for, you know, college luncheon at times and for youth retreats. And so we got to know Amy pretty well those first few years. And she just an incredible musician, but also just her focus on people when she's talking with people, as you mentioned, they came across that they were the most important people in the world to her right then. And so that was one of the things I learned from her, is that if you're gonna be talking with somebody, they need to have your undivided attention.
Wow. Yeah. Well, you know, we told this story. I had a little get together for my birthday, and you came over, and I appreciate you doing that. You were one of the only friends that came to that to my gathering. But
it was not well advertised.
It wasn't. It was spur of the moment. But I remember we're talking about you bringing in Mylon Lefevre for the I guess we called it the big youth. It wasn't the big youth thing. That big youth thing.
That big youth thing.
It was at the Carolina Coliseum. And the first time any kind of contemporary music, Christian music, was brought into a Southern Baptist, you know, scene at all. And I remember that night, a name that a lot of people in ministry are going to know, Clayton King was there. He was on the front row, and he was a college student at the time, and he was going ballistic. He was dancing. He was jumping up and down. And I remember you looked at me and you said, Chris, can you get down there to Clayton and just tell him that we want to keep having Christian music like this at Baptist events? And you know, back then Baptist didn't do a whole lot of foot tapping or jumping around. And I did get down there to Clayton, and he said, yeah, you're right. And he calmed down. So that was a pretty neat memory for me.
Right. And for the record, Mylon was not the first of the contemporary Christian bands that we had. We had several handful before him, but he was definitely one of my favorites that we brought in over the years.
Yeah. Now, the first time I ever saw you, you were at that big thing at the Coliseum. I was brand new Christian, and I remember you calling your mom. I remember you doing this most creative thing, and you were calling. You were the MC, and you kept, you know, the phone kept ringing. I was like, who is this guy, man? How did he come up with this bit? What was the whole deal? But you've always seemed to have a different way to do ministry, a different way to think about it.
I don't even remember calling my mom from there. So you remember more than I do about some of these things. Somewhere along the way, I realized that we serve to say the most creative force person. You can't understate it in the world. God is the ultimate creator. And so if we are made in his image, then I think each one of us has more creativity than we realize. I hear people say sometimes, "Oh, I'm not creative." And anybody that says that, that's almost self-fulfilling prophecy. I guess the first thing that you've got to do to be creative is to get over the idea that I'm not creative. And I don't necessarily know that I've got any more creativity than anybody else. I enjoy trying different kinds of things, and I think the more you do those kinds of things, then it just kind of snowballs and starts becoming more second nature.
Well, I remember at camp, the first time I ever went to camp, and I was a youth pastor, brought a group there, and I'd gone to like the Garden City Chapel a few times I'd never really had been to any kind of camp. And I brought that group in there, and from the opening scene to every music, all the music, all of the Bible studies, it was put together better than a Seinfeld episode. I mean, it all came together. I've never seen anything. I remember the theme was Dig Deep that year, and you used Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and it was just the most creative thing I'd ever seen in my life. And I was like, I really would love to be a part of this. And I was absolutely floored. But what the themes, how did you come up with the themes every year and coordinate every Bible study and write songs and record songs? I mean, how do you do that? I mean, that's a monumental task. That's unbelievable.
It was a year-round process. Usually by the end of one summer, we would already be thinking about the next summer. Sometimes we'd kind of have a theme even before that summer came along. And I don't guess there was any one particular thing. It changed. Sometimes the themes would come quickly. Other times it would just be just a lot of brainstorming and a lot of just brain racking, I guess, to come up with a theme. But then with the summer conferences, we did try to build everything around the theme. From being on staff, I'm sure you heard this. We want to try to do as much as we can within the theme. If we could figure out how to eat and sleep within the theme, we do that as well. But did enjoy writing, and so as a part of getting ready for the summers and for the conferences, would spend a lot of time writing our own Bible studies, writing the dramas that we do, writing music, which I enjoy doing as well. And that way, I think we were able to kind of unify everything, and it all came together, with whatever the theme was that summer.
So amazing how many things I wish people, could know, but the tying everything together and even just and there's nothing at that camp that wasn't thought about or just planned over. And what I think it did was it held it held the attention of young people. And one of the things that you told me a long time ago, I was a youth pastor and I called you up and I was talking to you about having fun versus serious Bible study. And I always treated it as if, and you see this a lot in ministry. People say, well, we took this fun oriented ministry and we turned it into a serious Bible study and all the kids left. And, you said, well, Chris, why can't you do both? Why can't you have fun and have serious Bible study? And I don't know what it is about Christianity where a lot of times we think, if something's fun, it can't really be, deep, or it can't really be spiritual. It's got to be one or the other. And you always taught me, you can do both. It can be one of it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Yeah, ministry and enjoyment does not have to be mutually exclusive, and obviously not everything in ministry is fun, but they don't have to be, as I said, mutually exclusive. We kind of the back of our mind is, we want to be able to have a meaningful time and a good time at the same time. And I think you can do that. Maybe not all of the time, but at least much of the time. And I certainly don't think that means that anything that we were doing was more shallow as a result. I think there was a lot of depth to what we were doing.
Right.
You can have depth even while it's enjoyable. It doesn't have to be just choosing one or the other.
Right. One of the things that I got to be a part of there was we used to do camp pastors, and I'm pro camp pastor because that's what I do. That's my thing. I mean, I like going and speaking to youth groups and speaking to groups and speaking to men's ministry, but the GNN, the Good News Network themed year, kind of made a shift, and it was a bold shift at the time where we went from having a camp pastor that preached every night to doing a total drama where the message all came in drama. Talk about that. How did you make that decision, or what was that all about?
We had for a number of years, we had been doing more and more drama. It started out as just kind of simple things, and they began to get more meaningful. They began to get deeper. They began to get longer. And we started realizing that was really speaking to students and to adults as well. And so that was becoming more and more a focus of it. And with the particular theme you mentioned, GNN, the Good News Network, I thought, what if we could do the entire message, the entire service as a drama, like it was a TV network. And let me quickly say, I'm not against preaching by any means.
Right.
This was never an anti-preaching thing. But I thought, I would really like to not have to stop and somewhere in there go have a traditional 30-minute message or whatever it would be, but just to be able to do the whole message time, if you will. But we actually incorporated music and everything all into the service. It was kind of seamless. And so I approached my director, Bill Mackey, who was the director of the evangelism department of the South Carolina Baptist Convention. I was his associate director. And I approached him with the idea of, Bill, can we do this? Because it was a pretty radical idea, for a Baptist convention to not have, as you said, a camp pastor. And I told him, I said, this is just for this year. This is not necessarily something I want to do every year. And we put just a lot of work, as you well remember.
Right.
First of all, I had to put a lot of work into writing scripts, but then just so much work that goes into staging and learning lines and blocking, and we didn't even half know what we were doing with some of that in the early stages, but we had an incredible response to it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not particularly comfortable quantifying things, in one way or another.
Right.
But I started to say, for what it's worth, I think it's worth quite a bit.
Yeah.
We had always had a lot of kids coming to Christ in
Right.
our other years, but when we went to doing drama, we just had kids responding like crazy. I mean, we had more kids come to Christ by far that summer than we had ever had. We were getting more content through. You get kids sometimes that would start getting fidgety with a preacher, but we were doing, hour-long dramas, in some cases maybe even hour-and-a-half long dramas, and they were into it and wanting more. And so it was exciting. And Bill Mackey came. He came throughout the summer and dropped in at certain times. And at some point in the summer, he looked at me and he grinned. He said, you're not going to be able to go back to doing it the old way, don't you? And that was what I wanted to hear. And I'm like, that's great. And for that to come from him. And so
Yeah.
we just continued on. And from then on, looking back, I'm sure, the drama that we did, in the early years, God used it most definitely, but we learned so much along the way. We brought people in that taught us things, and hopefully the drama did just continue to get better and better and better. And we eventually did some theater productions that came as a result of it.
Yeah. I mean, you started a pit. Now I'm going to go back for a second in a minute, but you started a piece of 72. You had a ministry theater where you did dramas on a Broadway type scale. I mean, it was absolutely you know, as good of, I've been to Broadway plays, and it was as good as anything I've ever seen on Broadway.
We had, as we started doing more and more drama, and the drama kept getting better, uh people were coming up to us quite often saying, you need to be doing this kind of thing in Myrtle Beach or Branson or Pigeon Forge at one of those theaters. And I'm thinking, you know, we can't just show up at one of these secular theaters and say, hi, we've got this Christian production we'd like to do,
Right.
as much as I would like to do that. But we kept hearing that. And I know that one of the youth ministers that was coming, because he was hearing the same things people say it, he actually was from Myrtle Beach. He said, you know, if you're interested in doing that, he said, I know some people that run some of the theaters in Myrtle Beach. I'll be glad to put you in touch with them. And so he put us in touch with David Bishop, who owned at that time Fantasy Harbor in Myrtle Beach, and set up an appointment for us. And I put together a video presentation of some things that we had done, and kind of went down and presented what we would like to do. And David, a very committed Christian man, and he got excited about it. And to try to make a long story a little shorter, they basically turned a theater, a major theater, over to us for the summer to do the presentation that we took one of the dramas that we had done that summer and greatly increased it. And it became we called it A Piece of 72, the greatest story ever told. But one of the things that I was conscious of when we did that is that what had been perceived as excellent at a summer youth camp was not going to be perceived as excellent in a secular situation alongside Carolina Opry and Alabama Theater and other shows down there. And so we again, it's incredible how the Lord brought a lot of things together. But we felt like we were in good shape. Mike Blackwood headed up music for us. We brought in some help on the drama. Susan McCullum was one of the most incredible choreographers in the country, and the Lord brought her into our life, and she came in and worked our tails off on some incredible choreography. And so I refuse to go into that kind of setting with the crutch that if it's Christian, it doesn't have to be as good because it's ministry. In my mind, if it's ministry, if at all possible, it needs to be even better. And so we worked incredibly hard putting together a production that was basically the story of Jesus set in the 1970s Jesus movement. Again, a little bit of a strange idea, but I remember the first night we got word that the theater critic from the Myrtle Beach Sun News was going to be there opening night. And people that own the theater, that own Fantasy Harbor, they said, now don't worry, she doesn't like anything. You know, you can get a bad review and it's still a good show. And you know, just, you know, I guess any kind of exposure is good exposure. And so I was prepared that she doesn't really like anything. And she came, and she was, and just to put it in perspective, she was not a believer. And so it's not like she had a bias in our favor. She wrote the most incredible review on our show that throughout the summers we got to know people at other theaters like Carolina Opry and other places. They kidded us like, so what did you have to do to get that kind of review? Nobody gets those kinds of reviews. And so it was, you know, it was an incredible experience of being able to present the gospel in that kind of setting. And that took us even deeper into thinking God can use, you know, can use drama. He can use our theater experience that we were gaining along the way in ways that could make a difference.
Wow. I tell you, it was absolutely fantastic. I'm going to back up just a little bit. We're going to connect the Fishers with Men here. Now, when I was on staff, one of the rules that you used to say is, hey, we're going to share our faith all day at the camp. And then at night, we'll make that preacher look good. You know, we will lead kids to Christ and do that. So I'm doing everything I can. There was this kid one day, and he was ready to be saved. And I was sitting there and I said, man, it sounds to me like you want to give your life to Christ. And he said, I really do. And I went, wait right here. And I ran and got you. And I remember you came down and you sat down, and I watched you. I watched you lead this kid to Christ. And I can honestly say that was one of the turning points of my life. That set my life on a whole nother direction that day to do what I'm doing right now. That watching you be a fisher of men helped me do what I do even right now today. And so,
and I have a very vivid memory of that. But quite honestly, we've talked about this. You and I probably remember it a little bit differently.
yeah.
Because in my mind, when I sat down with the young and I began to ask him, what have you and Chris been talking about? And has he related things to me that you had shared with him? I'm thinking Chris has already shared with him pretty much everything he needs to know. And all that was left for me to do was to basically ask him, based on everything that you and Chris have talked about, would you like to invite Christ into your life? And he said, yes, I'd like to do that. And so, I led him in prayer. Again, in my mind, you had done the heavy lifting at that point, and I just kind of wrapped it up. And the young man prayed. He invited Christ into his life. And the part that I do remember the most is kind of seeing the look on your face. It was almost like, a light bulb went on over your head, kind of a cartoon light bulb. And there was just sort of an astonished look in your face. And, it looked like you were thinking, well, that was easy. Anybody ought to be able to do that. And Chris, and not because this is your podcast, but I've said this to many other people, you went on from that moment and became first one of the most committed and effective people at sharing the gospel on a personal level of probably anybody that we've had on staff. And I honestly mean that.
Well,
and
praise the Lord for that.
And I kind of regret that, that there's, we've had obviously other people that have done that, but, in all those years, I wish we'd have had a lot of people that had surpassed what you were doing in that area. We joked about the fact you love to fish in the lake there at the conference center. And, I kind of challenge you with the idea of, okay, Chris, for every fish you catch in the pond, you need to, we're fishing for people here. So you need to, lead at least one person to Christ for every fish that you catch. And I imagine most weeks you probably did that. But it didn't end there, because that's, if you want to use the old terms that we used back then, that was personal evangelism. But, I had no idea that you would go on and become just the evangelist, is in terms of mass evangelism that you have become.
Well, I tell you, that day was the turning point. For me, it defined a lot of who I am, and I can never thank you enough. God used you to start that fire in me to be able to do that. And I really think it's really the only thing I can do in my life. And so, because I sure can't be a fisherman. I know that all my fishing buddies know that. So I'm going to move on now, and I'm going to get you to, let's talk about your latest endeavor. You're kind of dressed. You're dressed kind of like a trout guy, but you dress like a fishing guy. You got your Fishers of Men National Trail hat.
At some point, I was thinking, anyone that's watching this, and we haven't even, is thinking, what is this guy sitting here dressed like this for? Has absolutely nothing to do with what we've been talking about. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, tell us about, Peter Once a Fisherman. You've got a dramatic, it's by yourself. You go in and you look at the life of Jesus through the eyes of one of the most famous fishermen that's ever lived, Peter.
Yeah. I mentioned the chalk drawings, and for years and years, actually decades now, along with the special effects chalk drawings, I've been doing dramatic monologues. And Peter was actually one of 5 characters that I did as part of that presentation, and just a very short monologue by Peter. And I thought, gosh, there's so much more to Peter's story. And at some point, I started thinking, and again, I do a lot of preaching, so please don't, I hope you know this, but I'm not against preaching, but I was also looking for something that I could do on Sunday mornings, in place of just a traditional 30-minute or whatever sermon. And I thought, Peter's story would make a great just dramatic monologue, one person show. And so just sat down and I went through all 4 gospels, just comparing Peter's story in all 4 gospels because even though I tell it with a lot of contemporary twists, I wanted it to be, just as scriptural as possible. And so it's actually a little bit longer. I was shooting for 30 minutes when I originally wrote it. It was probably 45, 50 minutes, and I tightened it up to about 35, 40 minutes, I guess about 40 minutes, and have really enjoyed becoming Peter. One of the things with the drama that we do, I have jokingly said, even when I do biblical characters, I refuse to wear a bathrobe and sandals. That's just, not my idea of costuming. And so I like to do more contemporary costumes, even when we're talking about biblical stories. And since you do have a lot of genuine fishermen that watch this, I've realized from the beginning that it's a strange costume, because Peter is still fishing with nets, but yet he's wearing, like a fly fishing vest. And so there's a lot of inconsistencies with that, but we have very much enjoyed being able to do Peter, Once a Fisherman, his story. I mean, Peter is somebody that when we know his story, I think all of us can identify with different parts of Peter's story. But we've done it on a lot of for Sunday morning services, Sunday night services. We've done it for banquets. We've done it for just a lot of different types of things. And would love to do it for more and more fishing events, along the lines of a lot of what you have done. I think you have a tremendous ministry there. And so Peter has joined in with what we have done. And I'm honest with people. I'm not a fisherman. You joke about not being you are a genuine fisherman. I have fished, but not compared to the people who are usually part of the Bass Chaplain podcast. But I very much enjoy being able to share the story of Christ. It's his story as told through the eyes of Peter.
Right. And nobody's ever going to remember any bass they ever catch in eternity, but meeting Christ is everyone. That's going to matter in 10,000 years. And so, all right, if people want to get in touch with you and they want to get you to come and do Peter Once a Fisherman or a chalk drawing or any of the other dramas that you do, how do they get in touch with you, Bill?
In different ways. We have a website. It's concoctions.com, but you have to know how to spell concoctions, CONCOXIONS.com. And maybe you can throw that graphic up somewhere along the way.
I will. We're going to put that graphic up.
Post-production.
Yep. We'll do that.
And so there's information on the website, and our phone number is on the website as well. 864-587-7269. And so email is on there. They could call Chris Wells if they wanted to. I suspect
I can get you in touch.
But we are enjoying getting the opportunity to do more and more in drama. We're right now getting ready to do, we do something called Christmas Chronicles, which is five characters that were a part of the Nativity. And so we're gearing up to do that again. And we're actually in a little bit of a transition in our ministry. The conferences that you talked about, that you were a part of, we made the decision to bring those to a close in 2019. And the timing was good on that, because a few months after that, the pandemic hit.
That's right. Yeah.
And another one of the conferences that we did, Chili Pepper, that we did, unfortunately, is I guess at this point is kind of a victim of the pandemic.
Right. Yeah.
And so a lot of people think because we're no longer doing sea salt, no longer doing Chili Pepper, that we have retired. That is one of the biggest misnomers. Even at lunch today, a minister friend came up to me at Fuddruckers and said, "So how are you adjusting to retirement?" And I'm like, we have no interest in retiring. We're not able to retire, even if we were. And so
Bill Cox is not retired.
That's my middle name now.
Not
Bill,
retired.
I am not retired Cox. And so, but we're not doing the conferences that we once did, but Kathy and I are very much enjoying being able to go, into churches and other groups as well, and doing a lot with with the dramas that we've mentioned and some others. We do some leadership training and preaching and some other things. And so,
and all your
thank
kids
you for
are
mentioning
involved
that.
in ministry in some way. And then you had a big announcement with Taylor. Tell us a little bit about Taylor. And, that was a pretty exciting announcement when you saw that. Tell us a little bit about what your son Taylor does.
Yeah, well, I'll mention all of them. All three of our kids grew up being a part of our ministry. There is no way that we could have done, put so much into the summers and being gone all summer if they weren't there and a part of it. And one of the great things is that our staff over the years helped raise our kids, and our kids got some incredible experience being a part of Sea Salt and all growing up, and they have all been in ministry in some form or another. Christopher, our older son, he's a youth pastor at a church in Nashville. Sherry, she is on staff along with her husband. He's the worship leader, and she is basically the missions director at a church in a suburb of St. Louis. Taylor, at some point, as a part of our staff, he started out on stage with the rest of us doing dramas and things. But somewhere along the way, we needed to replace our video producer. And he came to me and said, "Dad, I'd like to be considered for the job of video production." And I said, "Well, I'd kind of hate to lose you from the other side of things." I told him, I said, I can't give it to you just because you're my son. It's an important part of what we're doing. And so we got him the equipment to be able to do a good job. He sort of auditioned for the job and putting together some things. And from the word go, he just started doing the most incredible video productions that we had ever had, and just continued to get better and better and better. Started doing video productions for other people. At one time, when he was still working for us, he was freelancing for North Point Church in Atlanta, one of the biggest churches in the country. And then he ended up going on staff with them. Ended up leaving and still doing freelance. And he's done a lot of ministry projects, but also things for Chick-fil-A and Home Depot and some others that I can't. He usually has to sign non-disclosure things for some of the big corporations. But a secret that he has had to keep since back, I guess, back in the winter and the spring, is that he has been doing 3D. He does 3D graphics, animation, and project that he has been a part of for months and months and months has been the Black Panther, the Black Panther 2 that's coming out.
Wow.
And so he was not able to say anything. It's been a secret, but it's only been in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I saw that the Marvel
we've been
movie.
able to say anything. So
wow, to work on a Marvel movie, that's amazing, and they're all amazing. Kids.
Yeah.
Bill, I tell you, I want to thank you for being my guest today. And listen, folks, Bill is not a professional fisherman, but he is a professional fisher of men. And let me tell you something: if you want to book someone at your church or your ministry event that will be one of the most creative experiences you've ever had, it'll be scriptural. It will be absolutely awesome. You need to call Bill Cox. Bill, thank you for being here today. I appreciate it so much.
Chris, it's always great to be with you. Thank you.
All right. This is the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up.